Freiburg, Germany, 2011. A gentle breeze rolled through the narrow streets of the old town, where bicycles clattered against cobblestones and church bells rang every hour with stoic precision. Above a modest bakery with cinnamon wafting through its chimney, 10-year-old Lucas Meyer sat cross-legged on the living room floor. A pencil in his small hand, he sketched quietly, monsters with wings made of barbed wire, their eyes empty and mouths stitched shut. His mother, Anna, stood in the kitchen doorway, drying a plate and watching him. She often wondered where her son's imagination came from. So dark, so brilliant, and always too mature for his age. While most boys were drawing superheroes, Lucas was drawing nightmares. Lucas didn't talk much. His sentences were short, deliberate. But his eyes told stories, deep, searching, and a little bit sad. He was the kind of child teachers called gifted, yet classmates found weird. He didn't like sports. He didn't care for cartoons. But he could name all the moons of Jupiter and tell you how many bones were in the human hand. At home, he was his mother's world. They played chess in silence, took long evening walks, and watched documentaries about galaxies and strange sea creatures. Anna called him her little professor. She knew he was different, but she also knew how cruel the world could be to those who stood out. His father, Marcus Meyer, worked long shifts as a telecommunications technician. He left before dawn and often came home long after dinner, his hands still stained with wire grease. There was love in the house, but it was quiet like everything else. Everything began to change the day St. Martin's Middle School accepted Lucas's transfer. It was supposed to be an opportunity, a prestigious institution known for excellence. But in that grand, ivy-draped building with centuries of history and secrets buried beneath the marble floors, Lucas would come to know a darkness that even his wildest sketches couldn't capture. St. Martin's Middle School stood like a fortress on the edge of Freiburg's old district, an austere building made of gray stone, with narrow arched windows and ivy creeping up its northern face. It had once been a monastery. Some said the monks still haunted the halls. Anna held Lucas's hand as they walked through the iron gates. He wore his best sweater, navy blue, with a tiny embroidered rocket. A leather satchel swung from his shoulder, too large for his small frame. He didn't speak, but he didn't cry either. Inside, the corridors echoed with footsteps and murmurs. Tall lockers lined the halls. Teachers in polished shoes clicked briskly past. A crucifix hung in every classroom. Lucas was led to Class 6B, where 23 pairs of eyes turned to examine the new boy. The teacher, Herr Lindner, introduced him with a brief nod. Lucas Meyer, from Johannes Grunstjul. Welcome. Lucas looked around. The seats were taken. A boy in the back row, tall, blond, with a scar over one eyebrow, raised his hand. He can sit here, he said. His name was Henrik Foss, son of a wealthy banker, and the undisputed leader of the boys in 6B. Lucas nodded and sat. Henrik smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a smirk that promised trouble. At recess, Lucas stayed close to the wall. He drew in his notebook, but Henrik and two others approached, Jannik Bruhl and Elias Kraus. They surrounded him, pretending to be friendly. You draw monsters? Jannik asked. Lucas nodded. Cool, Elias said. Maybe you can draw what's in room 204. Lucas looked up. What's room 204? They grinned. Henrik whispered. You'll find out. Just don't tell anyone what you see. Ever. That night, Lucas came home quieter than usual. He stared at his dinner and ate little. When Anna asked how his day went, he said only, it was okay. But in his backpack was a note, folded, smudged, and written in jagged handwriting. It read, You're now. Don't speak. Don't run. Don't trust anyone. From that moment, Lucas's sketches changed. The monsters looked human. It began with silence. Lucas noticed how certain students exchanged glances when teachers weren't looking. Henrik, Jannik, Elias, and three others whose names he later learned. Felix, Alina, and Moritz. They moved like shadows, sat together, whispered in corners, and disappeared during recess only to return a few minutes before the bell. They called themselves the Circle. No one said it aloud, but Lucas heard it in fragments, behind doors, inside the restroom, scrawled faintly inside a locker, "The circle sees all." In the second week, Lucas found a small, rusted key taped to the underside of his desk. It was labeled 204. When he looked up, Henrik was watching him from across the room with a smile that never reached his eyes. Room 204 was always locked. It sat at the far end of the top-floor hallway, past the disused music room. Dust gathered near its base. The janitor avoided it. Teachers pretended it didn't exist. That Friday afternoon, Henrik passed him a note during history class. "Tonight, after school, come alone. Room 204. Lucas should have told someone. But something pulled at him: curiosity, fear, the desperate desire to belong. When the last bell rang, he didn't go home. He walked slowly up the staircase, each step creaking beneath his shoes. The hallway on the third floor was dark. Room 204 loomed ahead. He inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside, the air was stale. Curtains were drawn tight, and desks were arranged in a circle. At the center sat a thick book with no title. 7 candles, unlit, lined the floor. Around them, names were scratched into the wood in jagged letters. Some were German. Some were in languages he didn't recognize. The others were waiting. Henrik, Janik, Alina, all standing with solemn expressions. "Now that you've entered," Henrik said, "you're one of us. But you don't speak about what happens here. Ever. Not even to your mother." Lucas nodded slowly. He didn't know this was, but he was in. He didn't sleep that night. His dreams were full of shadows circling him, whispering in voices he couldn't understand. By Monday, he had his own symbol drawn in chalk beneath his desk, an eye with a bleeding tear. The circle had accepted him. But at what cost? From the outside, Lucas seemed fine. He did his homework, he answered questions in class, and he came home every day at the usual time. But Anna noticed the changes. His drawings had grown darker, more chaotic. One evening, she found a sketch under his pillow of 7 children standing in a circle, their eyes blacked out, their mouths stitched shut with thread. She tried to ask, "Lucas, are you all right? Are the other kids treating you well?" He only nodded, eyes downcast. "I can't talk about it," he whispered. At school, room 204 became the circle's sanctuary. They met there twice a week after classes. Each time, the candles were lit. Henrik always read from the book, the old, heavy tome with pages made of thick, yellow parchment and symbols etched in red ink. One afternoon, Henrik passed around a single sheet of paper. A contract. At the top was a line drawn in charcoal: "To know the truth, one must sacrifice silence." The contract listed a series of rules. You will not speak of the circle to outsiders. You will never betray a member. You will participate when summoned. You will not question the watcher. Your silence is your bond. Beneath it were 7 spaces for signatures. 6 were already filled. Henrik gave Lucas a black quill. "Sign it, or leave and forget we exist. But know this, no one leaves unchanged." Lucas hesitated. His hand trembled. Then he signed. The moment he did, a candle flickered violently. A gust of wind blew through the sealed room. The book on the desk slammed shut. "Welcome, brother," Henrik said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Now you see what others don't. Now you belong." After that night, Lucas's life began to split. One version he showed his parents, and another buried in secrecy. The circle began asking strange things. To sneak into the teacher's lounge. To listen at the principal's door. To copy private files from the nurse's office. Each act was framed as a test of loyalty. And every time Lucas obeyed, they rewarded him, with protection, with praise, with darker secrets. But something else had started to happen. Lucas began seeing things. Shapes moving just out of frame. A voice whispering his name at night. A tall figure in his dreams, faceless, standing in the middle of the circle's desk formation, beckoning. And beneath every desk where a circle member sat, the same chalk symbol appeared, drawn fresh each morning. An eye, weeping blood. By October, the weather had turned. Mornings came with a bitter chill. Fog rolled thick over the Freiburg hills, curling between the school's Gothic walls like pale fingers. Lucas no longer walked to school with excitement or fear. Now it was dread. The whispers had started. At first, he thought it was just echoes, old stone corridors, and too many students talking at once. But these whispers followed him. They came when he was alone. They said his name, stretching it across silence like a thread. Lucas. He told no one. Inside room 204, the circle had grown bolder. They spoke openly of the Watcher, a being said to have once haunted the monks who lived in the building centuries ago. According to Henrik, the Watcher demanded silence, obedience, and secrets. Lucas didn't believe in ghosts, but the circle did. Especially Alina. She claimed to have seen it, once, in the mirror in the girls' bathroom near the chapel wing. It doesn't walk, she whispered. It slides. And it's blind, but it sees you. Through walls. Through your thoughts. Lucas laughed nervously. The others didn't. That week, a new student joined the class. Her name was Mara Johansson, a soft-spoken girl from Sweden who had transferred midterm. She was different, confident, yet quiet. And within minutes, she noticed something strange about Class 6B. At lunch, she sat beside Lucas, though no one else dared. "You look tired," she said gently. Lucas blinked. "I'm fine." "No, you're scared," she said. "I can see it in your eyes." He said nothing. But that night he found a note in his locker. It wasn't from the circle. The handwriting was neat, curved. "They're watching you. You don't have to play their game." Lucas crumpled the note and shoved it deep in his pocket. He couldn't risk being seen with it. But he had questions. The next day, Mara approached him again during reading hour. "Room 204, she said softly, without looking at him. "It's not just a room. It's a door." Lucas froze. "What do you mean?" She met his gaze. "I've seen symbols like that before. The circle. The Watcher. They're old. Older than this school." "How do you know?" Mara lowered her voice. "Because my brother was in a circle like this. In Uppsala. He's gone now. Disappeared." Lucas felt the ground shift beneath him. For the first time, someone new. Someone who didn't want to recruit or intimidate him. Someone who could help. But the circle was already watching. That same afternoon, Henrik approached Lucas after class, his tone clipped and icy. "Stay away from her," he warned. "She asks questions. That's dangerous. For all of us." Lucas nodded. But his heart beat faster. He had just broken rule number 5. You must not question the Watcher. And now, the whispers had changed. They were no longer calling his name. They were warning him. "She's next." The school buzzed with ordinary chaos that morning. Late bells, shuffled feet, forgotten homework. But something felt wrong. Tangibly wrong. Elias wasn't in his seat. He had always arrived early, often already drawing strange patterns in his notebook before homeroom began. But this time his desk was cold. Empty. By mid-morning, rumors started spreading. Elias never came home the night before. His mother had called the school. The police had been notified. Teachers whispered in huddled corners. Some students were pulled aside for questioning. Lucas watched Henrik carefully, expecting panic or fear. But he looked calm. Too calm. At lunch, room 204 was locked. Henrik gathered the remaining members of the circle under the stairwell instead, eyes sharp, voice low. "Do not speak of Elias. Not here. Not to anyone. Especially not to her." He didn't say Mara's name. He didn't have to. "Was it the Watcher?" Alina asked. Her voice trembled. Henrik only nodded. Lucas felt cold spread in his chest. A boy had vanished, and they were acting as if it was inevitable. Expected. But something else happened that day. After classes, Lucas returned to his locker. Inside was a folded piece of lined paper. "Meet me behind the gym at 4. I found something." He didn't hesitate. Behind the gym, near the edge of the woods, Mara was waiting with a flashlight and a worn leather satchel. Inside were clippings, photocopies, and photos, blurred, grainy, some decades old. "These are from my brother's room," she explained. "Before he disappeared." Lucas looked through them, heart pounding. He saw a photo of a group of children in a circle around a lit candle. The photo was dated 1982. Beneath it, scrawled in red ink, "We called it the Watcher. We fed it silence. It fed on fear." Another image showed a boarded-up door, very similar to room 204. "He believed it wasn't just a story," Mara said. "He thought the Watcher was real, a spirit that grows stronger through rituals and fear." He found journals, old legends, even mentions of similar groups in France, Hungary, and Switzerland. Lucas's hands trembled as he held a photo of a symbol nearly identical to the bleeding eye under their desks. "Elias, he didn't just run away," Mara whispered. "I think they sacrificed him. Or something took him." Lucas couldn't breathe. The whispers had stopped that morning. But now he understood why. The circle hadn't just formed a secret club. They had awakened something. And Elias was the price. That night, Lucas stared at the contract he had signed. The rules. The ink. The spot where his name sat beside the others. He thought about tearing it apart. Burning it. Pretending none of it was real. But another note appeared in his backpack. This time, it wasn't from Mara. "Break the contract and you will replace him. The Watcher." After Elias disappeared, Lucas's world narrowed to shadows and whispered warnings. Mornings became a nightmare. Every mirror in his house seemed to reflect something wrong, something watching. Sometimes, in the glass, Lucas thought he saw a figure behind him. A dark shape, faceless and still. "Mom, I don't feel well," he said one evening, voice shaking. Anna put a hand on his forehead. "You're burning up," she said, worry knitting her brow. But the doctors found nothing wrong. That night, Lucas woke choking on cold sweat. His room was pitch black except for the faint glow of the moonlight slicing through the curtains. A low whisper curled around his ears, soft, mocking. "Join us, Lucas." He scrambled out of bed and looked into the mirror across the room. At first, it was just his reflection. But then the glass rippled like water, and a shadow stepped forward. It had no face, just a smooth darkness, but Lucas could feel eyes, hungry, accusing. He slammed the mirror with both hands, breaking the illusion. The reflection shattered, fracturing his image into jagged shards of light and dark. 4 days, Lucas avoided all reflective surfaces, but the shadow haunted him. It crept into his dreams, into the corners of his vision. School was no refuge. One morning, during gym class, Lucas caught a glimpse of the shadow again, this time in the locker room mirror. "Why do you run?" a voice whispered, cold as ice. He spun around. No one was there. Henrik was watching him from the far corner, lips curled in a knowing smile. Later, Mara pulled Lucas aside by the lockers. "Don't fight it," she said quietly. "The Watcher feeds on resistance. But if you accept it, maybe you can control it." Lucas shook his head, desperation rising. "I just want to be normal again." Mara's eyes softened. "I know. But sometimes, normal isn't an option." That afternoon, Lucas found a message scrawled on his bathroom mirror in a substance that looked like blood. "The Watcher sees your fear. It's coming." He wiped it away, hands trembling. When he returned home, Anna asked again what was wrong. He stayed silent. But deep inside, he knew the shadow was no longer just in the mirror. It was inside him. The chill of autumn deepened, and so did the darkness surrounding Lucas. The whispers had returned, no longer faint, but urgent, echoing through empty hallways and shadowed classrooms. Every night, the shadow in the mirror grew clearer, more insistent. One afternoon after school, Mara found Lucas sitting on the cold stone steps outside the school, head in his hands. The autumn leaves rustled in the wind like voices carrying secrets. "You're not alone," Mara said, sitting beside him. Her voice was firm, almost fierce. "But you're running out of time." Lucas looked up, eyes red-rimmed and haunted. "I don't know what to do. The circle, the Watcher, Elias. It's all too much." Mara reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, battered book wrapped in leather. "This is my brother's journal. He wrote everything, how the circle formed, the rituals, the history of the Watcher." Lucas took the book gingerly. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed but filled with frantic handwriting and crude sketches of the bleeding eye symbol, twisted figures, and strange incantations. Mara's eyes darkened. The Watcher isn't just a ghost or a myth. It's an ancient force that feeds on secrets and fear, and it demands sacrifice to grow stronger. Lucas swallowed hard. What kind of sacrifice? Blood, loyalty, and silence, Mara said quietly. It's been connected to disappearances for decades in schools all over Europe and the US. My brother tried to expose it, and then he vanished. Lucas's heart pounded. What can I do? First, Mara said, locking eyes with him, you have to break the contract. But that's dangerous. If the Watcher senses defiance, it will come for you, and whoever you care about. She paused, voice dropping to a whisper. And it already knows about you. Lucas looked around nervously. How do you know? Mara's gaze shifted to the school's looming windows. Because it's watching us right now. Suddenly, the wind picked up. The rustling leaves turned into a low howl, and Lucas's skin prickled with cold. Mara stood, clutching the journal. We have to prepare. There's an old ritual in here, one that might seal the Watcher away, at least for a time. But it requires the courage to face what's in the dark. Lucas nodded, fear and determination mixing in his chest. As Mara walked away, Lucas felt eyes on him, unseen, but real. He wasn't just fighting shadows anymore. He was fighting for his very soul. The days grew shorter, and the gray skies hung low over Freiburg like a warning. Lucas and Mara met in secret, poring over the brittle pages of the journal in Mara's small attic room. Candles flickered, casting long shadows as they read the cryptic rituals written in faded ink, ancient chants, protective symbols, and warnings of the terrible price. Look here, Mara said, pointing to a passage underlined in red. Only the brave who dare to face the Watcher without fear can bind it. But beware, the Watcher feeds on doubt and betrayal. Lucas swallowed hard. The stakes were higher than ever. Meanwhile, the school's atmosphere had turned oppressive. The circle, once a whispering secret, now stalked the halls with cold smiles and watchful eyes. Rumors swirled about another student, a quiet girl named Sophie, who had suddenly stopped coming to class. Henrik was quieter now, less playful. His eyes held a dark fire, as if preparing for something inevitable. One evening, as Lucas walked home through the fog-drenched streets, he noticed figures lurking in the mist, shadows that seemed to move just beyond the streetlights. The whispers were louder, more insistent. He clutched Mara's journal close, feeling its weight like a lifeline. Back at home, Anna noticed Lucas's growing exhaustion and pale face. You need to tell me what's happening, she urged one night, but Lucas shook his head, too afraid to reveal the truth. The Watcher was no longer just a story. It was real. And it was coming. Lucas knew they had little time. The night was cold and still as Lucas and Mara gathered at the edge of the forest behind the school, clutching the worn journal and ancient artifacts salvaged from Mara's brother's belongings. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their twisted branches clawing at the moonlight. We have to do this before the next full moon, Mara whispered, eyes fierce. The Watcher's power will peak then. Lucas's hands trembled as they traced the symbol of the bleeding eye etched into the earth, a ritual circle from the journal. Remember, Mara said, don't show fear. If it senses weakness, it will take everything. They began chanting the incantation, their voices weaving through the cold air. A strange wind stirred, carrying with it a low, guttural growl. Suddenly, shadows coalesced at the circle's edge, dark, formless, but alive. The Watcher had come. Lucas felt a cold grip clutch his heart, but he forced himself to stand tall, eyes locked on the shifting darkness. The creature spoke without words, an ancient, terrible presence filling his mind with images of vanished children, broken families, and unending night. Mara stepped forward, brandishing a small talisman glowing faintly with a bluish light. This ends tonight, she declared. The Watcher lunged toward them, a swirl of darkness and despair. Lucas shouted, "We're not afraid." Together, they completed the ritual, the talisman flaring bright as the circle pulsed with energy. The shadow screamed, a sound that echoed through the forest and into the night. Then silence. The Watcher vanished. But as Lucas and Mara looked around, their victory felt hollow. Henrik's voice echoed from the trees. You think it's over? You've only just begun. The ritual's eerie silence hung over Freiburg like a fog that refused to lift. Lucas and Mara returned to school, their hearts still pounding from the confrontation with the Watcher. Yet the uneasy calm was shattered the very next day. Sophie, the quiet girl who had vanished weeks ago, reappeared, but something was wrong. Her eyes, once soft and kind, now gleamed cold and distant. She walked the halls with a strange, robotic precision, ignoring friends and teachers alike. Lucas watched her from across the cafeteria, suspicion gnawing at him. Had the Watcher taken her too? Was she another pawn in its game? Then came the shock no one expected. Henrik approached Lucas after class, a thin smile playing on his lips, but his eyes dark as night. You think you've won? Henrik's voice was low, almost a hiss. The Watcher's power isn't just out there, it's inside us all. And some of us embrace it willingly. Lucas's stomach churned. Why are you doing this? He asked. Henrik's smile widened. Because fear is power. Because silence is control. Because I'm tired of being the scared little boy. He pulled a folded note from his pocket and pressed it into Lucas's hand. You've been warned. Step aside, or join us. Lucas looked up to see a group of students materializing behind Henrik. Members of the circle, faces cold, eyes hard. The betrayal stung deeper than any blade. Mara's warnings echoed in his mind. The Watcher feeds on doubt and betrayal. Lucas realized then that the greatest danger might not come from shadows or spirits, but from those he once trusted. The school corridors that once echoed with laughter and learning now felt like a battlefield. Lucas stood at the center of a growing war, surrounded by friends turned foes and secrets spilling like poison into the air. Mara was his only ally left, her resolve stronger than ever, but even she was shaken by the depths of the circle's influence. We can't trust anyone, Mara warned, eyes scanning the shadows. Not even Sophie. Lucas nodded grimly. Sophie's blank stare was proof enough that the Watcher's grip was tightening. Together, Lucas and Mara began to gather those still uncorrupted, students and even a few teachers who had noticed the strange disappearances and unexplained fear. Late at night, in Mara's attic sanctuary, they planned their next move. The ritual had weakened the Watcher but hadn't destroyed it. And now the circle was desperate. One evening, Mara uncovered a hidden chapter in her brother's journal, a ritual that could sever the Watcher's connection to the physical world, but it required a willing sacrifice. Lucas felt the weight of that word, sacrifice, pressing down on him. Meanwhile, Henrik's faction grew bolder, spreading fear and silencing dissent. The school was on the brink of collapse, and the lines between friend and enemy blurred. As Lucas stared into the darkness, he realized this battle wasn't just for survival. It was for the soul of every person caught in the Watcher's web. Under the cover of darkness, Lucas, Mara, and their small band of allies prepared to perform the secret ritual hidden deep within the worn pages of the journal. The night air was thick with tension, each breath visible in the cold. They gathered in an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town, its stained glass windows cracked, its pews covered in dust, but it held a strange power, a connection to something ancient. Candles flickered as Mara carefully laid out the ritual circle, inscribing the symbols with chalk while murmuring the incantation softly. Lucas's heart hammered, every shadow seeming to reach for him. This ritual will sever the Watcher's hold, Mara explained. But it needs a sacrifice, someone to willingly give up their connection to the living world for the greater good. All eyes turned to Lucas. He swallowed hard. The weight of the choice settled like a stone in his chest. Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside. Henrik and his followers had tracked them down. You can't stop what's already begun, Henrik sneered, stepping into the chapel, eyes blazing. This ends now. A tense standoff erupted, voices rising, shadows twisting. Lucas realized the ritual wasn't just a battle against the Watcher. It was a fight for their very souls. The cold chapel was a battlefield of wills and shadows. Lucas faced Henrik, the two young men embodying the forces tearing their school and their souls apart. Mara began the ritual's final chant, her voice steady despite the chaos. Henrik lunged, desperation fueling his attack, But Lucas dodged, fueled by a resolve born from pain and fear. The candles flickered wildly as the room seemed to twist, shadows stretching and snarling. Then the Watcher appeared, a massive, swirling darkness with bleeding eyes that pierced the soul. It screamed silently, a void hungry for despair. Lucas stepped into the ritual circle, chanting words from Mara's brother's journal. The Watcher surged forward, reaching for him, but Lucas held firm. Henrik, seeing the Watcher's fury, hesitated, and in that moment, Mara completed the ritual, the talisman flaring bright. A shockwave of light blasted through the chapel. The Watcher screamed, then shattered like glass, dissipating into the night. Henrik collapsed, his dark energy broken. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas sank to his knees, exhausted but alive. They had won, but the scars would remain. The dawn broke over Freiburg with a fragile light, filtering through shattered windows and onto weary faces. Lucas, Mara, and the few survivors emerged from the chapel, their bodies tired but their spirits unbroken. Word spread quickly, the Watcher was gone. Yet the victory came at a cost. Henrik was gone, his dark presence lifted but leaving a hollow silence. Sophie, freed from the Watcher's grip, wept quietly in Mara's arms. The school slowly began to heal, but the memory of the fear lingered in every hallway and classroom. Lucas found himself haunted by the faces of those lost and the weight of what might have been sacrificed. Anna, finally understanding the truth, embraced her son, her tears mixing with his. But even in the light of victory, shadows remained. A last page in the journal fluttered open, a cryptic warning. The Watcher's shadow may fade, but it never dies. Beware the next time the bleeding eye opens. Lucas looked out toward the horizon, knowing that the fight might not be over. Some darkness lingers, waiting, and the scars of fear run deep. Weeks had passed since the final ritual, but Freiburg was far from peaceful. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, from just beyond the edges of his vision, from the shadows of his own mind. His nightmares were filled with whispers, flickering images of the Watcher's bleeding eye. Mara pored over the journal again, searching for clues about the warning, why the Watcher might return, and what would happen when the bleeding eye opens once more. Meanwhile, a new teacher arrived at the school, Dr. Evelyn Krieger, an expert in folklore and occult studies. Her calm demeanor and deep knowledge intrigued Mara, but also raised questions. Lucas met Dr. Krieger after class one day. "Your fight isn't over," she said quietly, eyes sharp. "The Watcher is ancient and it adapts. You must be ready for when the shadows stir again." Her warning hit like a cold wind. At home, Anna grew distant, haunted by her own memories she refused to share, memories that might hold keys to the past. Lucas realized the past and present were more tangled than he ever imagined. The Watcher had roots deep in Freiburg's history, and maybe in his own family. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the answers were closer than he realized, hidden in plain sight. Determined, he confronted his mother, Anna, at home one rainy evening. "Mom, there's something you're not telling me," Lucas said, his voice steady but urgent. Anna's eyes filled with pain. She hesitated, then finally spoke. "Our family has been tied to the Watcher for generations," she whispered. "Your great-grandfather tried to stop it, but he paid a heavy price." She pulled out a faded, leather-bound diary, worn and fragile. Inside were notes, sketches, and warnings about the Watcher's curse, a darkness passed down through their bloodline. Anna revealed that the bleeding eye symbol was their family's mark of protection and a constant reminder of the price they paid to keep the evil contained. But the seal was weakening. The Watcher's return was inevitable unless the family's curse was broken once and for all. Lucas stared at the diary, the weight of legacy settling on his shoulders. He realized his battle was no longer just about surviving the Watcher. It was about breaking the chains of his family's past. As Lucas delved deeper into the diary's pages, the dark history of his family unfolded like a tragic saga. Generations before him had faced the Watcher, each attempting to contain its malevolent power with sacrifices, rituals, and secret pacts. His great-grandfather, Matthias, was the first to bear the bleeding eye symbol, a mark meant to bind the Watcher and keep it at bay. But the cost was severe. Matthias's life, and the lives of those he loved. The diary chronicled Matthias's desperate attempts to protect his family, including cryptic entries about the bloodline's burden, a curse passed down through the generations. Anna confessed that this burden was now Lucas's to bear. "The Watcher seeks the weakest link," she said, voice trembling. "You must be strong, or it will consume us all." Lucas felt the weight of destiny settle upon him, heavy and unyielding. But he wasn't alone. Mara stood by his side, her determination unwavering. Together, they began researching ancient texts, searching for a way to break the curse without more sacrifice. But time was running out. The next full moon, the Watcher's moment of greatest power, was only days away, and the bloodline's burden threatened to become a shackle. The night was thick with anticipation, the full moon casting an eerie glow over Freiburg. Lucas and Mara prepared for the confrontation that could end the Watcher's curse, or doom them forever. Ancient symbols were drawn with painstaking care around the old chapel, candles flickering in the chill wind. The air buzzed with unseen energy. Lucas's heart hammered as memories of his great-grandfather Matthias's sacrifice flooded his mind. As the moon rose to its zenith, a shadow emerged from the darkness. The Watcher, more powerful than ever, its bleeding eye blazing with hunger. Henrik's betrayal had been a small spark. Now the fire raged fully. Lucas stepped into the ritual circle, voice steady despite the fear. Mara began chanting the ancient incantations, her voice weaving through the night. The Watcher screamed, a sound that chilled the soul, before lunging. Lucas stood firm, calling on the strength of his bloodline and the love of those fighting alongside him. The battle was fierce, shadow against light, despair against hope. At the climax, Lucas offered himself, embracing the burden willingly. A brilliant light exploded, shattering the Watcher's hold. As dawn broke, the oppressive darkness lifted. Freiburg was free. But the victory came at a price. Lucas's strength waned, his body marked forever by the bloodline's curse. Mara caught him, tears in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "But the story, it's not over." The sun rose over Freiburg, casting warm light on a town slowly waking from its long nightmare. Lucas lay in a quiet hospital room, bandaged and weak, but alive. Mara sat by his side, holding his hand tightly. The school was healing, children returning with cautious smiles, and parents breathing a collective sigh of relief. Anna visited daily, her eyes reflecting a bittersweet mix of pride and sorrow. Though the Watcher's curse had been broken, the scars ran deep, inside the town, inside their hearts. The bleeding eye symbol had faded from the diary's pages, but Lucas knew some part of that darkness would always remain. Dr. Evelyn Krieger returned to her research, vowing to guard against any future threats. Lucas and Mara made a silent promise, to watch over Freiburg, to protect it from shadows yet unseen. As Lucas gazed out the window, he thought of Matthias, the sacrifices made, the burdens carried. A new dawn had arrived. But the story of the Watcher, and the bloodline sworn to contain it, was far from over. Because some shadows never fully disappear. Thanks for watching. If you're hooked on gripping stories like this, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling tales. Your support means the world to us. With love and gratitude, I invite you to join our community for more captivating content. Subscribe now for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you.